The envelope was cream-colored, thick, and embossed with the kind of stationery nobody uses anymore, unless they mean something by it. My name, Lucas Bennett, was written in a sharp, deliberate script I hadn't seen since my high school graduation card. My grandfather's handwriting. Inside, a single folded note. Christmas dinner, 5 p.m. sharp. Formal attire. Attendance expected. Walter. That was it. No greeting, no signature flourish, no RSVP details, just a summons, like he was still a WWIE commander and we were all soldiers under his command. I stared at the card for a long time before setting it on my kitchen counter next to unopened mail and a half-drunk mug of coffee. I hadn't been to the family farmhouse in nearly 7 years. Not since the last time Christmas dinner turned into a shouting match over inheritance rumors and old resentments. I remembered the crack in the dining room window, the one my Uncle David said was from hail, but we all knew better. My mom, Helen, hadn't mentioned the invitation when we talked last week, but that was her way keep things close, until they couldn't be avoided. I called her. "You going?" I asked. A pause. Then, "He's getting old, Lucas. Might be the last one like this." That was her pitch. Not sentiment, just inevitability. I told her I'd think about it. But even as I hung up, I knew I'd go. Not for him. Not really. For the story I'd never gotten. My grandfather, Walter Bennett, wasn't known for warmth. He was the kind of man who believed showing affection was a sign of weakness and silence was power. He built a fortune in real estate, bought land instead of stocks, and raised his children like soldiers, disciplined, obedient, and emotionally stunted. So an invitation like this meant something. I didn't know what, but I had the feeling it wasn't about turkey or tinsel. A week later, I stood in line at the dry cleaners, picking up the only suit I owned. I stared at myself in the cracked mirror above the counter. 30 years old, high school history teacher, no wife, no kids, no legacy, just memories and questions. "Formal attire," he'd said. "Fine. Let's play his game." The farmhouse hadn't changed. Same wraparound porch, same black shutters, same driveway that crunched like bone under tires. The sky was gunmetal gray when I pulled up, the kind of cold that settled in your bones and stayed there. I cut the engine and sat in silence for a few seconds, watching my breath fog the windshield. The last time I was here, Aunt Margot and Uncle David were screaming across the living room over my grandmother's will. I was 22, nursing a warm beer in the corner while people twice my age acted half my age. Margot had left for Europe the next morning. David stayed behind and called it cleaning up the mess. Now Margot's silver Mercedes was parked beside David's pristine pickup. Seeing both in the driveway felt like a pressure system gathering over the roof. Something was coming. I grabbed the bottle of wine I brought cheap but not insultingly so and walked up the steps. The door opened before I could knock. My mother stood there in a forest green sweater, hair pulled back like always. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You came," she said. "I was invited," I replied. She stepped aside, and I stepped in. The house smelled like rosemary and lemon polish, warm but artificial. Christmas lights blinked on the banister. Voices echoed faintly from the back room, Margot's laughter, brittle and forced. "She's been here 2 days," my mom whispered. "First time in 10 years. I followed her into the kitchen, and there she was, Aunt Margot. Still elegant in that old money, don't ask how we pay for it way. A silk scarf around her neck, glass of red wine already half gone. She turned as I entered, and her smile froze halfway up. "Well," she said, "the prodigal nephew. Back at you," I said. She raised her glass slightly. "It's good you're here, Lucas. Really. You should be here." That was the first time I noticed the way she looked at me like I was a puzzle piece she wasn't sure fit anymore. Something was off. The tension wasn't just family tension. It was anticipatory. Like everyone had rehearsed a scene I didn't know my lines for. I had a bad feeling this wasn't just dinner. Dinner started at exactly 5. Not 505. Not once. Everyone's. Here. 5. On the dot. That was how Walter Bennett did things. She's time. His rules. The long mahogany table gleamed under the chandelier, every place setting identical, polished, and precise. It felt more like a boardroom than a family gathering. Margot sat to Walter's left, David to his right. Helen and I were closer to the end, next to the kids' table that hadn't had kids at it in 15 years. We filled our plates with glazed ham, roasted vegetables, and something that looked like mashed potatoes but tasted like a grudge. Small talk buzzed around the table like flies. Real estate markets, the new hospital wing, weather patterns. All so safe, it felt dangerous. Every comment had a double edge. I hear Asheville's grown a lot, David said to me across the table, his voice slick as varnish. Lots of teacher demand out there now, huh? More than enough, I said, sipping my water. He smiled like he knew something I didn't. Probably thought he did. Margot barely touched her food. Every so often she'd glance at Walter, then back at David, like she was checking her watch against a detonation time. She asked about my school, but not like she cared. Just filling air. Walter hadn't said a word since we sat down. He carved his food with machine precision, ate in silence, and drank water. No wine, no scotch, no cigar. For a man who usually took over every room, his silence was louder than the conversation. Helen tried to keep the peace. She always did. Asking about work, complimenting the food, pretending not to notice the sideways glances between her siblings. But I could see the tension in her jaw, the way her knuckles whitened on her fork. Then came dessert. Margot stood to clear the dishes, but Walter raised a hand. Leave them, he said. His voice was gravel and finality. Everyone froze. The air in the room shifted something heavy, electric, waiting to be released. He reached slowly for his glass, tapped it once with the back of his knife. The sound was soft, but it hit like a gunshot. I think, Walter said, eyes scanning each of us. It's time you knew the truth. My fork hovered an inch above my plate. The room held its breath like we were waiting for thunder. Walter didn't look at anyone when he said it, just stared into his water glass like the truth might rise up from the bottom. It's time you knew the truth. 7 words. That's all. David scoffed lightly. Dad, this isn't the time. But Margot stood up, wine in one hand, other hand trembling slightly. He's not who you think he is, she said, voice sharp, loud enough to cut through David's words. All heads turned to her. Even Walter looked up then, his expression unreadable. David pushed back his chair slightly, not enough to stand, but enough to show he was bracing for impact. Here we go, he muttered. Margot ignored him. Her eyes were locked on Walter. You said we'd tell them together. I changed my mind, Walter said. What are you two talking about? Helen asked. Voice quiet but firm. I didn't say anything. Couldn't. My heart thudded in my ears. Margot took a breath, like someone about to dive into cold water. This family has lived off half-truths and silence for too long. You all treat the past like it's some fragile antique that'll shatter if anyone touches it. But guess what? It's already broken. Walter stood, slowly, deliberately. Enough, Margot. No, she said. You brought us here. You tapped your glass, like it was some kind of royal decree. You wanted this. Now finish it. David's chair scraped back as he stood. This is ridiculous. He's almost 90, and you're dragging skeletons out like it's some twisted Christmas game. Walter didn't move, didn't blink. Sit down, David. That voice, the one he used when someone was about to lose something. David hesitated, then sat. Walter turned to me, eyes narrowed, jaw tight. Lucas, there's something I need to tell you about this family, about who you are. My stomach dropped. Margot downed the rest of her wine in one long sip. You should have told him years ago, she said. Walter's mouth opened, then closed again. He looked tired, old in a way I hadn't seen before. "Who am I?" I asked finally. No one answered. Not yet. The silence didn't last. David pushed himself out of his chair again, pointing a shaking finger at Margot. "You always did this made-up stories, stirred up chaos right when things were finally settled." Margot didn't flinch. "Settled? You mean stolen?" "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "You're drunk." "I'm angry," she snapped, "which is more than I can say for the rest of you. Sitting around acting like this family hasn't been quietly tearing itself apart for decades." My mother had gone pale. She looked at me, then at Walter. "Dad," she said, barely above a whisper, "what is she talking about?" Walter didn't answer. He stayed seated, eyes low, hands resting on either side of his plate, like the captain of a sinking ship, refusing to abandon the helm. "She's talking about the will," Margot said, stepping around the table so we could all see her. "The one you never saw. The one Mom signed before she passed. The one that made Helen the sole heir to this house, the land, and everything attached to the Bennett name." Helen's mouth opened, then closed. She looked like someone who'd been shoved into a play, halfway through without a script. "Tu didn't know that," she said. "No," Margot said, "because it disappeared. Funny how David was the last one to see it. Funny how the one that eventually surfaced gave him full control of the estate, just days after the funeral." "That's a lie," David snapped. "The lawyer had everything. It was signed, notarized, filed." "Convenient," Margot said. "And where's the original? The one she had in her safe? The one she showed me a month before she died?" David looked at Walter. Tell them there was no other will." Walter looked up slowly. "I never said that." It was like a trap door opened under all of us. I stared at my grandfather. The man I'd thought was a Relichard. Distant, but not dishonest. But now he sat there, saying nothing, letting his legacy unravel across the dinner table. And suddenly I realized, I didn't know this man at all. And maybe I didn't know this family either. It was Margot who broke the spell again. "She showed it to me," she said. "In her bedroom. Yellow folder, top drawer of her vanity. Her handwriting, her signature. She looked me in the eye and said, 'Helen deserves this. She's the only one who never asked for anything.'" Helen sank slowly into her chair, one hand to her mouth. I thought there was a reason I wasn't in it. I never questioned it." "Exactly," Margot said, softer now. "Because you're decent. Because you trusted them." David stood like he might lunge across the table. "You think I forged a legal document? Are you serious?" Margot stepped forward. "I think you found a way to get what you wanted, David. Like always. Control. Legacy. Power. You were always our father's son." I looked to Walter again, hoping for a denial, even a scolding. Nothing. He stared at the glass in front of him like he couldn't hear any of us. "When did you see it last?" I asked, directing the question to Margot. "The night before Mom died," she said. "She made tea. We sat in her room. She told me she didn't want the estate to become a battleground. She said giving it to Helen was the only way to keep the family together. And then she died," I said. Margot nodded. "And the safe was empty. I asked the lawyer about the version she showed me. He said it didn't exist, that only the new one had been submitted." David ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. "You're making all this up. There's no proof." Margot raised her eyebrows. "You're right. There isn't. Not anymore." She turned to Walter. "Unless there is." Everyone looked at him. The silence stretched again. "There was another will," he said finally. David's mouth dropped open. "What?" Walter didn't repeat himself. Just sat there, the words hanging in the air like smoke. And that's when something broke loose in my chest. If there had been another will, one that gave my mother everything, and it vanished, If David had produced a new one conveniently favoring himself, and no one questioned it, then the version of this family I'd been handed loyalty, heritage, tradition was a lie. And suddenly, I wanted to know everything they'd buried. The argument carried into the living room, David shouting, Margot throwing back every word like she'd been waiting years for the opportunity. Helen sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, eyes fixed on the floor, saying nothing. I slipped away. I didn't know why at first, just that something in me felt off-center, like the ground wasn't where it used to be. That's when I saw him. Walter was alone in the sunroom, sitting in his leather reading chair, framed by dusk and antique silence. He didn't look up when I stepped in, but I knew he heard me. His voice came low, almost tired. Sit down, Lucas. I sat across from him, hands in my lap like I was back in Sunday school. He looked older than I remembered. Less iron-willed, more flesh and bones. You ever wonder why I invited everyone this year? I didn't answer. It wasn't nostalgia, he said. It wasn't about the holiday, either. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a tarnished brass key. Held it out. It's for the basement cabinet. Steel one. Corner of the storage room behind the oil tank. I took it slowly. It felt too heavy for its size. There's things down there you won't understand right away, he said. Letters. Documents. A tape. He cleared his throat, the sound raw and dry. Your grandmother made that recording a few months before she passed. She wanted it kept safe. My chest tightened. Why me? Because you're the only one who doesn't want anything from this family. No land. No titles. Just the truth. He met my eyes then. And because you're the only one who's not afraid to see us for who we really are. I swallowed hard. He leaned back slowly, as if that single exchange had drained him. You'll find what you're looking for down there. Just be careful with it. The conversation ended as abruptly as it started. I slipped the key into my pocket and walked back toward the living room, where the noise of inheritance and accusation still bounced off the walls. But my mind was already in the basement. The house creaked with silence after midnight. I waited until everyone had gone to bed or left in frustration. David's car was gone. Margot's door was closed. Helen was upstairs, the light beneath her door still on. I crept down the hallway past the dining room, past the kitchen, and opened the basement door. The air was cooler down there, dense with the scent of mildew and old wood. I flicked on the light and descended the stairs. The steps, groaning underfoot, like they resented my presence. The filing cabinet sat in the corner exactly where Walter said. A thick steel box, old and institutional, covered in dust. I knelt down and slid the key into the lock. It turned with a heavy click. Inside, manila folders, envelopes, brittle photographs, and a black VHS tape labeled 2004 for Lucas. I froze. My name. I reached for it last, hands trembling. But first, I flipped through the folder's legal documents, handwritten letters, insurance forms. One stood out. A draft of the original will with Helen's name at the top. Another envelope held a birth certificate, but it wasn't mine. It was Margot's. Her middle name had been changed in 1987. Why? I didn't know yet. I inserted the tape into the old VCR, stacked on a shelf beside a tube TV, and hit play. The screen flickered. My grandmother, Eleanor Bennett, appeared sitting in her armchair by the fireplace. Her voice was calm but firm. If you're watching this, it means Walter finally found his spine, she said. I didn't breathe. She spoke for 12 minutes. Said Helen deserved the estate. Said David couldn't be trusted. Said Margot knew more than she let on. Then, at the very end, her eyes narrowed. There's more than money at stake. This family has secrets, Lucas. And you, of all people, have a right to know. The screen went black. I sat in the dark basement, heart pounding. Nothing about that dinner had been an accident. The invitation, the arguments, Walter's silence. They weren't just passing on a legacy. They were passing on a truth none of them had the courage to speak out loud. Until now. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the basement floor with the cabinet open beside me, surrounded by papers that rattled every memory I had. Around 3 a.m., I found the letters. They were buried in an unmarked envelope, folded into thirds, yellowed with age. The handwriting was unmistakably Margot's, sloopy, dramatic, like someone who felt every word. They were addressed to someone named Angela. The first few were innocent enough. Talks of college reunions, men who disappointed, how she wished Angela would come back from D.C. So many exclamation points, so much affection. Then I found one that made my stomach twist. Dated August 1989. I know what happened between you and Walter. Don't deny it. I saw the way you two looked at each other at Mom's birthday dinner. And now you're pregnant? Jesus. Angela. He's my father. What the hell were you thinking? Another letter, dated a few months later. I won't say anything to Helen. She's already gone through enough. But if you name that child Bennett, I swear to God. There were more. Mentions of hush money. A manila envelope full of bank statements in Helen's name. Deposits Walter made like clockwork every month. One letter from Walter to Angela was short, typed, cold. I'll provide what you need, but this must never reach the children. I stared at the documents, the math tumbling together like dominoes. Angela was my mother's college roommate, her best friend. She died in a car accident when I was 2. I'd only ever known Helen as my mom. But the dates lined up. The names. The silence. I pulled out my birth certificate again. No father listed. Just Lucas James Bennett. I thought about the way Walter had looked at me all these years, reserved, distant, but never cruel. Like a man standing behind a glass wall, watching but never stepping in. Now I understood. I wasn't just some nephew. I was his son. And the entire family had known. Everyone except me. She was standing at the kitchen sink, still in her robe. Coffee untouched on the counter. Sunlight was just starting to crawl across the tile floor. She turned when I came in, her face soft, tired. You didn't sleep, she said. No. I held up the letters. You want to tell me why my birth certificate has no father? Why Margot wrote these? Her shoulders sagged like someone had been holding up a lie for so long, their body finally gave out. Lucas, she whispered. I was going to tell you. I didn't know how. My voice came quieter than I expected. Is it true? She nodded. Slowly, deliberately. I found out I was pregnant the same week Angela died. She made me promise to take care of you if anything happened. I was your godmother already. It wasn't a hard choice. And Walter? He came to me before the funeral, she said. Told me he'd take care of everything as long as no one ever knew. But everyone knew, I said. Margot, David, you. Tears welled in her eyes. We never talked about it again. Not once. But the money came every month. The gifts at birthdays. The visits. Always quiet. Always from the shadows. I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. You were never a mistake, Lucas, she said, stepping toward me. But he wanted you to grow up clean, unburdened by the family name. I think he was ashamed. The word cracked something in me. Shame. That's what this was. Not love, not protection, just shame wrapped in silence and money. He's your father, she said. But I'm your mother. In every way that matters. And I knew she was right. But it didn't change what was broken. The man who raised an empire couldn't even raise his own son. And the worst part? I still didn't know what he wanted from me now. Only that whatever came next, there was no going back. I found Margot outside the next morning, standing at the edge of the frozen pond, coat wrapped tight, cigarette burning low between 2 fingers. She didn't look surprised to see me. Sleep at all? She asked. No, I said, holding up the VHS tape and a folder thick with documents. We need to talk. She exhaled slowly, smoke curling like fog from her lips. Then let's talk. Inside, I laid everything on the dining table me. Grandmother's video, the letters, the bank records, even my birth certificate. Margot leafed through the papers in silence, her jaw tightening. When she watched the video, she didn't blink once. Well, she said when it ended, I always said Mom had better judgment than the rest of us. David's version of the will isn't just unethical, I said. It's criminal. She nodded. I always knew he played dirty. Just didn't think he'd risk that much. I have something else, I said. I opened my phone and pulled up the voice memo app. Last night, when David was yelling in the foyer with Margot, I'd stood nearby, out of sight. I hadn't meant to record anything. But when I heard him say, it was just a rewrite, she was going to give it all to Helen, and that would have been a disaster. I did what I had Toto keep it in the family. I hit record. The audio was fuzzy but clear enough. I pressed play. David's voice filled the room. When it ended, Margot looked at me like she was seeing something entirely new. Well done, she said. We called David. Told him to come by. No excuses. No rescheduling. He showed up 20 minutes later in a pressed coat. Already irritated. What now? I didn't say anything. Just pressed play again. The recording echoed off the hardwood floors. His face dropped. I didn't mean, he started. You meant every word. Margot cut in. You always do. He looked at me. What do you want? Money? Property? I want the truth, I said. And I want you out of the way. He left in silence. For once, David Bennett had nothing left to say. Walter called for a meeting that evening, his word, not mine. He didn't ask. He summoned. We all gathered in the formal living room, the same one where my grandmother used to hang wreaths and hum old hymns by the fire. Margot sat beside me, arms crossed. Helen took the seat nearest the window, pale and unreadable. David stood in the doorway, silent, face blank. Walter entered last, wearing his best suit and holding a manila envelope under one arm. He looked tired, but steady. I won't pretend this has been easy, he began. And I won't ask any of you to forgive me. That's your decision. But tonight, we put an end to the secrets. He opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of documents, setting them on the table in front of him. This is a revised, notarized will. Executed yesterday. You'll find copies for each of you. He paused. Looked at me. In this will, Lucas is named executor of the Bennett estate. All assets, holdings, and properties will pass through him. He will decide what happens to this house, this land, this legacy. The room went still. Helen's hand covered her mouth. Margot blinked twice. David turned red, then white. Walter cleared his throat. He is the only one here who hasn't tried to take what wasn't his. The only one who hasn't played games or asked for more than he's been given. And what about who he is? David snapped. You think that doesn't matter? Walter turned to him. It matters more than anything. And that's why I'm doing this now. He looked back to me. I should have told you the truth years ago. I was a coward. I thought protecting you meant staying away. But you deserved to know who you were. And I failed you. I couldn't speak. Not yet. I built this family on land and contracts and control, he said. But legacies built on lies don't last. If we want anything to remain, anything real, it has to start with truth. He turned and handed me the folder. I'm not asking you to fix us, he said. Just to be better than we were. And for the first time since I'd walked through that front door, I saw Walter not as a tyrant or a myth, but as a man trying to make something right before time ran out. David stood with the folder in his hand like it was radioactive. His eyes flicked from Walter to me, to the others, searching for someone to take his side. No one spoke, not even Margot. Especially not Helen. I built this place, he said through clenched teeth. I held it together while you all disappeared. Walter's voice was steady. No, David, you hoarded it. That's not the same thing. David threw the folder down like it bit him. You're making a mistake, he spat. Giving it to him? A teacher? A bastard? I didn't flinch. I'd expected worse. Walter didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You're no longer part of this estate. Leave your key. Don't come back. The words landed like a gavel. David stormed out without another word, slamming the door so hard the window panes shook. No one followed. The silence he left behind was strangeless, heavy, more hollow. Like a space had been cleared, but no one knew what to do with it yet. Margot turned to Helen. I should have told you about the will. I was angry and scared, but mostly angry. Helen nodded, her eyes glassy. I would have believed you. I know, Margot said. That's what made it harder. It wasn't dramatic. Just two sisters easing open a door that had been locked for too long. I sat across from them, feeling like an intruder in a moment that didn't belong to me, yet somehow existed because of me. Walter retired quietly to his study after the meeting, his shoulders sagging, every step slower than the last. I stayed behind, alone in the room as the fire sputtered and the antique clock ticked off another minute. The weight of everything pressed in the truth of my name, the responsibilities now tethered to it, the fracture lines in this family I'd once thought peripheral to. The house felt colder now, quieter. No more arguing, no more pretending. Just truth, laid bare and still warm from the telling. It wasn't the ending anyone wanted. But it was, finally, an ending. Christmas passed like a shadow after that. No gifts, no carols, just uneasy peace and a house learning how to breathe again. The morning after Christmas, I woke before the sun. I pulled on my coat and boots, grabbed a thermos of coffee from the kitchen, and stepped out into the frostbitten silence of the land I apparently now owned. The fields were exactly as I remembered them, as a kid blanketed in pale mist, fence lines etched in frost, the creek frozen stiff along its edges. But it all felt different now, heavier, like it had been waiting. I walked the perimeter in silence, past the rusted tractor no one used, past the half-collapsed barn Walter refused to tear down, past the stone wall where my grandmother used to grow lavender, the same dirt, the same trees. But I wasn't the same. For years, I'd thought of this place as there's Walter's domain, David's obsession, Margot's memory. I was just a visitor, tolerated but not truly seen. Now, apparently, it was mine. But that wasn't what weighed on me. It was the story, underneath the soil, the secrets, the silences, the deliberate omissions, dressed up as tradition. Walter had believed keeping me out of the truth was protection. Helen thought love could cover for a lie. Margot kept quiet, because no one ever listened when she raised her voice. And David, well, David clung so tightly to the family name he never realized he was suffocating it. I stopped at the old sycamore tree near the creek. Carved into the trunk was a name, Eleanor, me grandmother's hand, delicate and strong. Beneath it, smaller, was Helen. Then Margot. Then nothing. It struck me then. I'd never left a mark on this place. Never etched my name. Never believed I had the right. Until now. I pulled out my pocket knife, the one Walter gave me on my 18th birthday without a word, and carved Lucas beneath the others. Not as a claim, but as a reckoning. For the first time, I felt like a Bennett. Not because of blood, not because of land or paper, but because I finally understood what it cost to carry the name. And I wasn't afraid of the weight anymore. The farmhouse looked different now. Not in structure, the bones were the same, the porch still leaned a little, the paint still chipped in places, but in spirit. The Bennett estate wasn't a monument anymore. It had become something living. A sign at the edge of the driveway read, "The Eleanor Center for Community Conservation. My idea. Helen's blessing. Margot's funding." We turned the east wing into classrooms. The barn was now a co-op workshop. The old stables hosted community dinners twice a month. What used to be legacy now felt like purpose. Christmas came fast this year. Snow dusted the roof. Warm light spilled from the windows. Inside, a tree stood in the foyer, simple, elegant, nothing like the overdone versions from my childhood. Just enough. Helen arrived first, carrying a tray of cinnamon rolls that tasted like every Christmas I remembered. Margot followed, arms full of gifts for children she didn't know. A few volunteers came by to help with dinner, people from town who now felt like family more than any blood ever had. Then Walter arrived. He walked slower now, each step measured, his body thinner beneath the heavy wool coat. He used a cane, but refused help at the steps, pride still intact. I met him at the door. For a second, we just stood there, no speeches, no apologies, just time between us. He looked around at what the house had become, watched children running through the hall, heard laughter echo from the kitchen. "You changed it," he said quietly. "I had to," I replied. He nodded once. Then, just as he passed by me, he paused. "You did good, son." Simple, unadorned. But it hit harder than any inheritance. Later that night, after the food and the stories and the fire crackled low, I walked out to the porch alone. Snow fell in soft waves across the fields. In the window reflection, I could see Walter nodding off in the old leather chair, Helen and Margot washing dishes side by side. No shouting, no silence, just peace. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a guest in this story. I felt home, not because I'd inherited it, but because I'd finally made it mine. This story was intense, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.